to hear Marie Weichman. And if you know Marie at all, you know she's rather a high-energy, house-on-fire sort of person. So we all think it's a good thing that she managed to marry a fireman. Marie is a professor of art at Olympic College, and she is a three-dimensional artist. Her BFA is from Sam Houston, and her MFA is from Texas Tech. But she's been an artist in residence in China, Denmark, New Zealand, and all over the US. She's had exhibitions in Peru, in Germany, and in China. And she's been published in Ceramic Monthly, Ceramic Art and Perception, and a variety of other titles. In addition, she really is a community activist, and she's on the board with the Bainbridge Island Museum of Arts, and she is also associated with the Bremerton Arts Commission. So this is a woman who gets involved in a lot of things and makes a big difference in this community. Her statement is, it's important to me that each piece I create is embedded with both a sense of process and socially mindful purpose. With that, I give you Marie Weichman.
Thank you, Ruth. And I do not have a microphone, so I'll try to project for an hour. Thank you for coming out tonight, because I know it's cold out. I know you guys have a lot of other things going on, and I really appreciate that you're here tonight. I also want to thank the year 2017 for being so amazingly accommodating to a year that is about chaos. Really, think about it. Politics and our social behavior, I mean, that's kind of on us, and it's something we can work on. And the environment, that's pretty scary. When all of these things come together, and we feel like everything is just spinning out of control and just sort of unrecognizable, I think it's important to find something that anchors you. Something that you know has always been there and will always be there. So when I think about what that might be, there's three things. There's change, because we know change is the only constant. And there's death, because death is a guarantee. And no, not taxes. Art is a constant. Think about it. Art has been around since day one. Since the very beginning of human activity, from the first signs of the human race, we have been expressing ourselves through the creative act. And this is specifically a defining human characteristic. So things like expressing ourselves to others, to let others know who we are. And also for those times when we forget, and we will, for ourselves, who we are. But art also can show us who we can be. So let me ask you a question. How many of you have had to solve a problem, any problem, big or small, today? How many? Yeah, we all solve problems multiple times in a day. But we never stop to think where we learn to do that. Problem solving is a creative thinking skill. And it's a skill that has to be taught to us, and then we have to practice it. So let me ask you another question. How many of you have had to negotiate with somebody at least once this week? Your partner, your kid, your boss, right? Negotiating is not something we're born knowing how to do, but it is a skill that gets us what we want. And getting what you want, especially times like this, can feel very good. So problem solving and negotiating are interpersonal situations, and they require a complex form of communication. And specifically, the skills that have to be taught and practiced for successful outcomes are group dialogue, developing listening skills, and developing your sense of building confidence to explore ideas and maybe even conquer fears, and practicing problem solving. both by yourself and in groups. These are the things we have to practice if we're going to be successful in those interpersonal situations. And I'm telling you this because the arts provide access to the lessons that develop those skills. The arts teach creative thinking. And creative thinking combined with routine thinking allows us to be more than productive. We can be innovative. So, innovation is still tightly coupled with science, technology, engineering, and math, the STEM subjects. And innovation is actually a prosperous and sustainable pathway to success. But STEM alone is not enough. We have to be, before we can be innovators, we have to be creative thinkers. So, Sean Gallagher, who, and this is a mouthful, he is the founder of Northeastern University's Center for the Future of Higher Ed and Talent Strategy. And he was interviewed for an article. And he said, when asked about entering college, he said, "It often feels like you have to make a choice between the academic, liberal arts side or vocational training." But what he went on to say is that what employers today want in their candidates is both. So if we are going to meet those the need for more creative thinkers, we have to add art and design into our core areas of study. The creative industries are poised to transform the economy of the 21st century, just like science and technology did in the last century. The last century was the industrial age. Well, the industrial age is over. We have fully transitioned to a new age, the digital age. And as technology advances, the need for artists in disciplines and vocational training is growing rapidly. So because technology has transformed the human experience on a global level through those developments, those innovations made in the last century, like the internet, we're seeing a strong visual culture start surfacing. It's emerging. And that visual culture is creating a demand where we have to start being creative thinkers. So we have to start seeing in terms of images as a visual language. So the digital world, the digital age, and that media distribution platform that's developing it, that's pushing it out there, that is creating in the job market a demand for media, for digital services, and for content creators. So what we're seeing is, this is a 3D printed building, by the way. So what we're seeing is a demand for people who can create digital imagery, who can think in terms of working with the sciences, so that what we can do now is we can produce ideas that will move into a world that is including a virtual world. So virtual gaming, 3D printing, imagery for ideas. So 3D printed buildings, 3D printed shoes, and this one, a 3D printed mansion you could live in. These are all possibilities. These are the possibilities when art and technology come together. Just amazing to me. So all of those things are creating a demand in the world for visual content creators and digital artistry services. Here's another way to sort of figure out why we have a growing demand for visual imagery. So we see this a lot. We see visual imagery, animated, illustrated imagery start like explaining things, say foreign languages, like math. Math's a foreign language, right? So these are tools. These are tools that we can use. If I had access to tools like this, tools that are translating a foreign language, I would be so much better at math today. So all of this technology, all of these devices, all these software programs, it feels like we've had a revolution. And like that revolution has hit overnight. So the problem with that is we want to blame technology for all of the chaos we feel, for all of the disruption. And unfortunately, I think that takes us to a negative place. The reality is we need to connect the disciplines so that we can generate new ideas and innovative concepts. One of the ways that we do that is by trying to service this growing need that this visual culture that's growing is throwing at us. And in order to do that, we absolutely must replace STEM with STEAM. So STEAM, science, technology, engineering, art, and math, is a concept that was put out there by RISD, Rhode Island School of Design. And it was championed by RISD, and it has been adopted by organizations, corporations, and individuals all over the world. The goals of STEAM are to transform research policy to place art and design in the center of STEM, and to encourage the integration of art and design in our K through 20 educational systems, and to influence employers to hire more artists and designers who will drive the innovation within their companies. One of the ways that Olympic College is actually creating more access to a STEAM-based education is by developing a small waterfront property we have right here on the Bremerton campus into the Barner learning landscape. This property is a chance for the college to actually integrate, to try and raise the bar for all students from every discipline into that holistic application learning exercise on which STEAM is founded. But what we have to understand is that as we replace STEM with STEAM, the definition of art, how we know it and how we value it, has to change too. In fact, it's already changing. Art is no longer defined by the object or the product, as in, oh, well, that's art because it's in a gallery and I can buy it and I can take it home. But that's not art because I can't take that home. I don't know what to do with that. So in the past, if there was no artfully produced product, like a song, a poem, a dance, a performative act, then there was no art. But now we can define art as being also the process of activities that exercises creative imagination for a non-tangible outcome that is measurable beyond being a skill, the skill with which it was made, or the product. One of the ways, so I should tell you first, a French critic and theorist, so changing the definition of art is not new. In 1996, a French critic and theorist, Nicolas Beauregard, he coined the phrase relational aesthetics. And what he was saying is that the role of art is ways of living and models of action. Think about that. The role of art is ways of living and models of action. And one of the ideas, an example of that concept can be seen right here on OC's green space, where we recently acquired some granite boulders and benches, and it was a mutually collaborative project with the EPA. So what happened was the EPA had a mandate. They had to increase their outcomes for repurposing the materials they find. So the Gorst site that was being cleaned up recently, while they were doing that, they found this mound of architectural granite, beautiful stuff. And they contacted City Parks and Olympic College and asked if we would like to adopt some of this granite. Well, yeah, hello. This is free material you don't ever get your hands on. And so what it allowed us to do was guide our students through this process of creating a real-time living space, an outdoor space where people can relax, where they can be inspired, and where they can commune. And this is an ongoing project. It doesn't happen overnight. My sculpture students, every quarter until it's done, will be learning how to grind the granite, polish the granite, and install inspirational quotes on this stone. Another example of this concept from Beauregard is Mel Chin's installation called Revival Field. And what this is an installation that uses sculptural elements to build a field that actually repairs soil toxicity. Mel Chin is one of a growing number of ecological artists who are working within the STEAM model. Another one is Dan Phillips. And Dan Phillips and his company, Phoenix Commotion, do the same thing. And what they do is they build houses for low-income families, and those families help him build the houses. And he uses nothing but acquired materials. For example, he collects the overstock inventory from developers of larger sites, and he collects debris from walnut shells to discontinued frame samples to license plates and cork. These are his building materials. And what he's accomplishing is a house at the fraction of a price. He is reducing the amount of human waste that goes into our landfills, and he's relieving the developer of the cost to get rid of that overstock inventory because they have to pay to do that. But what's most exciting is that he's creating homes that are one of a kind, that are unique, and people get to live in these places. This is art. This is roles of living, roles of action, models of living. That's what this is. So Ruth mentioned my schooling. I did graduate with a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Graphic Design in 1988. And my training was pre-computer. All hand lettering, all hand illustration. And if any of you know anything about computer history or graphic design history, you know that in 1988, that's when everything in the graphics industry went digital. So I graduated with all of my technical training obsolete. Yay me. I survived that shift into technology by utilizing the lessons I learned through my art schooling. Creative thinking, networking, being open, how to be open to pathways, to possibilities, to my goals I wouldn't have otherwise considered. And being willing to take risks. Because I knew if I took risks and failed, and I would, I could try again and again and again until I got it right. And it worked. But what's exciting to me now, from this perspective, almost 30 years later, is that what happened to me, this is not good, but it is what it is, has happened to everyone around the world in the years since. That transition into a technical world, completely shifting everything you know, has been happening since that happened to me. I've seen it happen in society, in politics, everywhere. And what I've seen is this. The world has changed. We no longer live in an exclusively physical reality. We live in a new world. And this physical reality is so familiar, we know, we love it, still part of our world today. But so is a virtual reality, a reality where truths are built on a complex matrix. And like I said, we've seen that in society and politics. Now, according to science, truths are created when evidence is present. We know this, it's true. But life isn't that simple, is it? Especially now. We absolutely have to understand that if the truths are built on this complex matrix, then we have to change our way of thinking. We have to understand that the world is constructed in a way that's multidimensional. So when you think about that, all of like arts and humanities and the sciences completely coexist. So it used to be that the general thinking of art was the conscious use of skill and creative imagination to create, especially in the production of an aesthetic object. We need to change that way of thinking. We need to change our understanding of the definition of art so that we don't just define and measure the product or the skill with which it was made, but the purpose of those activities as well. So art is the product and the process of creative activities that engage thinking as it relates to creative imagination, communication, and skill. Now, changing our understanding in this way is very exciting, maybe for some of us more than others, but it's also crucial. It's very important that we understand that what's happening is that the arts actually have to be something that's a livable thing. So if we understand that art, well, let me put it this way. If the arts are organic, right? It's a living thing. So if we change the way we think of the world, instead of being mechanical, if we change our thinking that the universe has its patterns, its context, and its relationships, this is called systems thinking. So rather than viewing the world as a machine, we can view it as a living network. And that's why understanding that the arts and the humanities are completely intertwined. Arts and humanities with science. Science pushes the boundaries of knowledge, and the arts and humanities push the boundaries of creative imagination, communication, and skill. And together, we can be innovative again. So, what we have to make that happen is space in our communities and in our educational system where creativity can be explored, where students can safely, inside and outside, explore ideas and identity under the guidance of mentors and instructors. And that is why the College Instructional Center is so important. This is a place where the college can raise the bar for students through interdisciplinary collaborations and access to creative spaces. I like to call it the Smores Factory. And I call it the Smores Factory because this building will house health occupations under the same roof as the arts. And that makes this building a truly STEAM-centric building for the community and our students. And that is smart. And it's a factory because we build things. We teach our students how to make people and things whole again through an inclusive process of learning. By prioritizing space in our community and our educational system where the creative act can be practiced and appreciated, we are teaching future leaders, future parents, and future innovators how to sustain themselves and those around them as they go through life. We give them the tools they need to succeed, and they give back to us the chance for a better tomorrow. So, I love this piece. It's my friend's work. We know that the arts are deeply embedded in our lives, socially, politically, and privately. And because of that, we have to learn to recognize art. We have to know what it is and how to value it. So, culturally, the arts provide culture. Through cultural activities, neighborhoods and communities can create a sense of identity, globally, locally, regionally, and those creative activities allow us to learn more about other groups of people. And when we do that, when we learn more about other groups of people, we gain respect, we develop tolerance, and more willingness to make room in our lives for those others. Creative access to cultural activities teaches the public about human histories and about personal expression. And that's a beautiful thing. Jack Troy came and did a workshop here, and that's one of the many things that we can do more of in our Smores Factory. That building has state-of-the-art facilities that will attract speakers and artists from all over, nationally and internationally, to come give workshops, presentations, performances. And programming in the OC building, in our new building, the Smores Factory, will allow this college to deepen and enrich the community through cultural activities. So politically, the arts provide a platform where people can speak out, protest, educate, and communicate current socio-political needs that are relevant today in ways, and this is the important part, in ways that are attractive to the rest of us, in ways that make us want to know more, in ways that make us want to help find a solution that's peaceful. And to me, that's a huge, important, sort of non-tangible, but it is a value that we have to respect about art. Art provides a voice where people otherwise feel voiceless and invisible. They can be now seen and heard. Another reason why the arts is political is centered on, around the issue of funding, federally and on statewide level. It always seems to be on the battleground, right? We know that the arts attract tourists, and we know that tourism funds economies. So the best way to argue for the arts in politics is to understand the economic value to any community. Let me give you a couple examples. On Bainbridge Island, the arts organizations leveraged $3.78 million in additional spending through their shops, in their restaurants, and local businesses. And according to the 2017 State of the Arts report from the Texas Cultural Trust, the state of Texas generates $5.5 billion from the arts, contributing $343.7 million in state sales tax revenues annually. And what's shocking to me is that the creative industries in the state of Texas employ 1 out of 15 Texans. That's almost 800,000 innovation workers earning an average wage of $80,300 versus the $44,000 non-creative industry workers make. So what I'm saying is, art does make money. And another reason why the arts are economic and therefore political, but also into the social, back to that social area of the arts, has to do with safety. When the arts, when streets and alleys and storefronts are dark and shadowy and derelict looking, we don't want to go there. They're not safe looking. We don't want to go there. Crime happens in those places. But when you liven those places up with color, with cultural activities, then what you have are people coming out, people getting to know each other. They're bonding, sharing stories. Neighbors develop a neighborhood identity. And then what happens then is when people take care of their neighborhoods, of their property, property values go up and crime goes down. So privately, the arts has the capacity to sustain each and every one of our personal, unique needs in this world. By that I mean our health, our sense of self, and our ability to contribute successfully and positively to society. The health industry services the needs of mentally, physically, and emotionally of every member of this community, of any community. And one of the ways they do that is through art therapy. A lot of people don't know how to say what's inside their hearts. They just feel they don't have a voice. But the art they make gives a little window through which the rest of us can see into their hearts and into their minds, and that way we can better service their needs. through their stories, we can service their needs more appropriately and in ways that we might not have otherwise considered. And this is good because we're helping others then become positive members of society who can contribute in any way that they would like to. Art tells stories for military veterans when words don't work. And theatrical experiences build confidence to conquer our fears as we go through life. And working with wood or clay can repair muscle damage, and it can even retrain the body to do things differently after trauma. I think we all know how well music can fill the soul and heal the heart. Art isn't just something you can kick to the curb when we don't have enough money, because the creative act is inherently human. It's in our DNA. This is something that we have used from the very beginning of time. It's been present from the first signs of human existence, and we still use it to communicate today. When we understand the arts as a viable tool for successful living, mentally, physically, and emotionally, we will do more to protect it and protect access to it for everyone. Jennifer Roberts wrote an op-ed for the, no, it wasn't an op-ed, it was an article she wrote for Harvard Magazine. And in it, she describes a project that she does with her students. She takes her students to a museum or a gallery, and she says, pick one piece of art and sit with it for an extended period of time. No talking, no selfies, no texting, no notes, no sketching, nothing. Just look, just see. The museum and the gallery setting is crucial for successful outcomes of this project because she's extracting these students from their familiar surroundings and all of its distractions, and she's putting them, sadly, in an unknown space, the museum. This unknown space primes their brain for the unexpected. She sets them up to be open. And what she's really doing is teaching them to slow down, to pay attention, and to listen. And when they learn to do that, they've got skills to more successfully interact with others. I know this because I actually do it with my students. I take my students to the Bainbridge Island Museum of Art, and I tell them the same thing: pick art, sit there for 30 minutes, no talking, blah, blah, blah. They are not happy campers. We have to do what? Then I go through and I say, time's up, time's up. What? It is? I mean, they had no idea 30 minutes passed, and they stand up and they start talking to each other about what artwork they looked at, what it made them feel and think. They are so engaged and inspired. And a lot of them say, oh, I want to come back. That was great. And so what I'm actually doing is I'm actually getting them to slow down long enough to go places in their head that they don't otherwise even know exist. But it exercises their imagination. This exercise allows them to sit down and for 30 minutes daydream with approval and take their imagination out for a walk. But it also allows them to rest. Let's be real. Some of them probably start falling asleep. But I go around like, wake up, wake up. But that rest is necessary. We don't give it enough to ourselves. We don't take enough time to rest. So that little bit of time that they get to go and look and let their daydreams take over, and it's okay. They're getting to rest. And this is something that allows them to sustain themselves for the next day and the next day and the next day. However, they do have to come back the next week with a paper. They're not happy about that either, but whatever. They have to write a reflection paper, and this is an important part of the process, because when you sit down and you have to write in a way someone else will understand, all those abstracted thoughts and imagination, flights of fancy that you had, and you have to do it after the fact, like you got to try and remember, and then you have to translate it, it allows them to filter that experience into something reasonable, something tangible, and as they write, they quite often discover possibilities, things they might really be able to do. So this is a very important process for any future innovator, not the least of which for all of us. Another thing that happens is that in that writing process, they see a little bit of themselves. They end up saying, oh, that's my story. That's what happened to me when. And when that happens, you gain clarity, you gain self-awareness. And with that comes understanding, healing, forgiveness, and peace. Can you imagine the world today if every one of us had to do this kind of exercise throughout school? I wouldn't be up here talking about a chaotic world, I can tell you that. David Brooks wrote an op-ed piece for the New York Times titled The Creative Mind. And in it, he describes the creative act. And he describes that moment that is the creative act as being when two unlike things, completely different things, collide together to become a third transcendent thing. And when I read that, I thought, I've been doing that with my students and I didn't even know. I was teaching them how to be creative thinkers. That's a tough thing to teach. It's kind of abstract. But this is something you can all do. And it's fun. You can even make a game out of it with your coworkers. I tell my students to go home and bring back one organic object, one man-made object that have nothing to do with each other, but when put together, they say something completely unique and different, that they can't be that thing unless they're together. So here's an example. Who can tell me what this is? Did I hear rock and roll? Rock and roll! Rock and roll, baby. Here's another one. Just look at the parts and say the words. What do you think that is? Yes! It's fun. You're exercising your creative thinking, not just building these, but trying to read them. Is there any other class in school that would make time and space for this kind of learning? No, I don't think so. This is why we have to embrace STEAM over STEM, where this kind of learning can happen. So, to have a sustainable and a prosperous future, we have to include the appreciation and the practice of art or the creative act in any way. And the people who already know this have a deeper sense of self and of others. And that gives them a richer life. Look at it this way. If art is a nonverbal language, then understanding art is like understanding a second language, but not just any language. A language that transcends time and space and can unify the world. This is a very important thing. So teaching art and practicing art is not about making the best craftsman, the master craftsman, or conceptual artist. It's about learning and practicing lifelong learning skills like creative thinking and problem solving and negotiating and communicating. With those skills, you could go on and become a musician, a poet, a painter. That'd be great. Screenwriter. We need you guys. But you don't have to. With those skills, you can be anything you want because you will be able to sustain the disruption and the shifts that happen, and they will, that this world will throw at you. So here we are. I'm standing here telling you in this crazy you-know-what world that art is needed now more than ever. Really? Yes, it is. Because when we exercise the creative act, we are practicing our ability to be better human beings. Thank you. So we'll take questions, and Julie's got the microphone. She'll shuttle it around.
The microphone is for the TV cameras. It's not going to project your voice, but make sure you...
And I will try and repeat your question. Does anybody have any questions at all? Anything about Michael?
In a STEAM curriculum at the foundations level, where do you find the balance between technical proficiency and self-expression, social change, critical thinking?
Well, I think when you're talking education, oh, I've got to reiterate that question, and I'm not sure I can.
In a STEAM curriculum at the foundations
In a
level,
STEAM curriculum at the foundations level,
where do you find the balance between technical proficiency,
where do I find the balance?
thinking, self-expression, and social change?
Okay, so it's almost like that whole craft versus art argument in a way, but technical proficiency and creative expression, where do we find the balance in a STEAM-based world? I think starting with education, so in curriculum, it's not about necessarily one being more important than the other. It's about a holistic exercise through education. So I can go to one class and I can learn skill and I can learn formula and I can learn equations and reason. And I can go to another class where it is totally safe to explore all these ideas I wouldn't have thought of anywhere else. To not be restricted, to have the confidence to develop new ideas. And so what happens then is that I leave school and I go out in the big world, and now I know how to do both. And it's that what I was talking about that was said about employers wanting both. Now I can go and I can go for whatever job, but now not only do I have the skill for this job and the technical training, I now also can give to my employer the ability to be creative and think outside the box, so to speak, and maybe even suggest new ways that weren't possible. So that would be my STEAM education. With a STEM education, I don't have that rounded way of applying creative imagination with discipline and skill and technical ability. So they're learned separately, but they're applied together. Does that make sense? Start with a tough one. Anybody else? Another question? Yeah.
I'm not sure where I'm going with this, but I've seen modern art abstract, and things that really don't make a lot of sense, and I hear people comment or say this or that about it. Where's the originality? $1 million piece of art is just a bunch of scribble. Is that a I don't understand that sometimes, and people don't seem to get it either.
Yeah, he's asking the question, abstract art, modern art, these things are not understood by a lot of people. We don't really recognize what it is, and so how do you value that? And why is that worth $1 million when it's a white-on-white painting? Good question. The reality is that if we look at the history of art, and this is where education has failed everybody, is that over the last 100 years, we have educated out creativity. It's not like you learn it. We were born with it, but it was educated out. And so we go to school, and we're not taught about art history. And everything in this world is relevant to what came before. So if you don't know what came before, you have no interpretation for what is now. So abstract art, modern art, is the outcome of having funneled the arts into an area where it was so specific that it was not universally understood. And people lose interest. People don't want to support it anymore. They'd rather go to a baseball game. So your not understanding abstract art is not uncommon, and it can change. The reality is it's imagery that's relevant to the world in which it was made. And as far as what's original, there is no original. And when we study art, when we learn art history, we know this. We know that everything comes from something else. So we have to look at things like studying the universe, that systems thinking in terms of context, relationships and patterns. This is what it is, but what does that mean relative to all this? And if you're not given all this, you can't figure that out. We have to change that.
What is Olympic College doing to encourage art in the secondary schools and in the public education system?
Well, K through 12 is not something the college has any real influence over beyond being able to connect with those instructors. So, for example, I have a friend in the ceramics field, and he runs the art program at South Kitsap High School, and he would like to find out what our curriculum is so that he can prepare his students for college in terms of the arts. And so what I can do, and what most of my colleagues can do, is reach out to the K through 12 and say, here's where you need to get your students, and here's how we can do it together. Beyond that, my job picks up where those jobs leave off. So it's more about what we can do as individuals to get out and promote and push a STEAM idea in the K through 12 as well as K through 20. Does that answer your question?
So it's a struggle.
It's a struggle. It is a struggle because we still have to convince people of the value of it. And until people understand that the 21st century is essentially going to be dominated economically by visual culture, then it doesn't seem like we're necessary. But when you can't give people, young people, early on that language, they're not going to be prepared for the future.
I thought this was very interesting. I teach a basic science at the University of Washington, and I think that it's a very good point you make, and I had never thought of it. These basic sciences, even though they're very rigorous, they also are very creative. But I don't know that that is really taught or appreciated, and it might be part of getting more people to do STEM, which is also needed, to put part of the art in it, to show them that it can be creative and that they can use their creativity, and that part is not really emphasized.
Right. So you were teaching at the University of Washington. What were you teaching?
Microbiology.
Microbiology. Yikes. You know, when you said that you do agree that the sciences are creative but not really taught that way,
That's
yes, dead on.
That's right.
We need to not teach in the STEM mental place, but in the STEAM mental place, because in my mind, scientists are as creative and as curious. Mm-hmm. Scientists, like artists, ask what if. Engineers ask how to. Mm-hmm. So we have this because we in the arts have we have practiced and exercised our creative thinking more than anyone else really in the disciplines. We can go broader with the what if. But the scientist wasn't given those tools traditionally. So they might be able to come up with what if, but if the scientist asks the artist what if, together that what if becomes so much broader. And then the engineer can say, yeah, okay, great, how to? Let me figure this out. And so that relationship is where innovation happens. Otherwise, we just get stuck reinventing the wheel. And other countries who start doing STEAM, you know, their education starts skyrocketing, and we're left in the dust. We have to change that.
And think of how much more attractive the STEM things could be.
Oh, yeah.
If they knew that it was the A there, too.
Yeah, I mean, face it, art is sexy. And if you could take that and give a little shine and polish to STEM, that's what STEAM is. Everybody benefits. I get it, yeah.
What are other countries doing in terms of integrating STEAM into their curriculums?
What are other countries doing in terms of integrating STEAM? Well, I think, and I'm not an expert in education globally, but in my travels, what I've seen is that culture has everything to do with what we learn and how we learn it. And many countries on this planet are significantly older than us with huge histories. And those histories are so embedded in traditions for them, they never stopped teaching literature and music, the things that consumerist America, I mean, if it doesn't make $1, why bother? So it's a cultural thing, I believe. And this visual culture that's arising out of the dust, out of technology's innovations from the last 100 years, that is going to drive the change in this country, probably more significantly than other countries, because we've been the most remiss at it. Anybody else?
as curator of the Valentinetti Puppet Museum in downtown Bremerton. I think many people, perhaps in this audience, as well as the community at Broad, don't know what a tremendous resource they have. Puppetry is one of the creative art forms, involves all sorts of human expression, whether it's the creation and use of the voice in different ways and motion, or in creating objects that can stand for various other possibilities in the creative field. And I'm trying to interest people in what they have here in the community as a resource, both within the educational system as well as the community at Broad.
Yeah, so
It transcends all sorts of things, including your economic thing as a tourist
absolutely.
attraction.
You're a business in downtown Bremerton.
Yes.
And your puppet museum is another place where human histories and traditions are shared and taught. So puppetry is a form of art in many ways. I mean, it covers all of them. It's got the craftsmanship, it's got the storytelling, it's got the performance. And it's an amazing place, but it's just one of many ways. I mean, puppets, who would have thought? And the Quilt Festival in Houston, that is a huge moneymaker. Quilts. Because they tell stories, because they're traditions, because we can immerse ourselves in that process. So I think it's true. I think that as a Bremerton business owner, you're able to sort of testify how the arts really enriches your community, but also the struggle we face, getting people to value it enough to make time for it. These are choices we have. So we have to do more to communicate the value in making those choices. So my sister Ann doesn't project like, well, she does, but
I don't have to, I'm up front. It occurs to me that I think people innately have inspiration and thinking outside the box, but in a culture that continually represses people's ability to have permission to express new thoughts in the middle of a biology class or something, to do something different and brave. It's sort of a self-esteem issue. Mm-hmm. Can you talk to me about how art can increase the ability for people to get their message out in a way?
Yeah. So I have students who are not going to go on to become artists, and they are shy. And when they get into my class, they have to figure out how to express themselves and have the courage for other people to see it. And by the end of the quarter, what they've accomplished is that, yes, I can do this, and I don't crater and have a heart attack when somebody doesn't like it. So the practice of art and the practice of sharing that experience with others builds self-confidence. But also, my nephew, for example, was on his college improv team, and you have to get up on stage, and you've got to be ready with no script. When you can do that, then you suddenly have the courage and the ability to go into any environment, a classroom, a STEM-based classroom, a job interview, and you can think quickly and creatively, and you have the confidence to speak with confidence. So these art classes, we do have classes where students are afraid to suggest something that sounds bizarre, and we need to change that culture. And that's why if more people could take the arts, whether it's digital film or poetry, then what happens is they get to go into their other classes and they get to put to practice that newfound confidence. Anything else? Kate?
So what I'm hearing a lot of you talk or speaking of here tonight, Marie, is that collaboration is important. And so what I'm hearing, I want to make clear that this is what I'm hearing, is that the student would be prepared to go out into their other classrooms or their other walks of life and be able to use this. I just kind of think it would be really cool if there could be all sorts of interdisciplinary studies that would be based on this, like team teaching and things of that nature.
Right, and so what you're saying that what you're hearing is that collaboration is key. And what else were you saying about?
That the students should have those tools so that they can integrate it into the rest of their lives.
Right.
There would be such an amazing opportunity to do team teaching.
Right. And we have, actually, we've got a group of faculty here at the college who really love, like Amy and I have done, and Sue and I have done, where the arts and the sciences get our students together. But also, when students have to do service learning, they've got to go out of the college environment and do something for credit and bring it back to the class. And so anytime we do interdisciplinary, or say MESA students, math, engineering, science, they can come to the art department and say, we'd like to build something visual that expresses what we do. Then we find ways to do that. When they practice collaborating in the classroom, they're better collaborators in the boardroom. Anybody else? Okay, well, thank you for bearing with me.
Thank you, Marie. We really appreciate your presentation tonight.